Hey everyone, Ryan Bolton here, Bible nerd. Boy, am I down a crazy rabbit hole. So, I got the idea that I wanted to maybe research a little bit the different names that have been associated with God or different nicknames you have. You got El Shaddai and you got some of these names out there. So, I thought, would it be fun to kind of start going down a rabbit hole and see where some of these names originated from and where their stories were? And I ran across the word Jehovah. We've all heard that name, Jehovah. There's even a religious group known as the Jehovah Witnesses. And man, it started sending me down a crazy rabbit hole. So I thought I would jump on here, kind of play this with you and see what you know about these names and just explain some of the things I've been researching tonight. So let's back up a little further. So how the word Jehovah came about is really fascinating. And it's amazing to see the art and the creativity and some of the things you have to do as part of Bible translation or translating any language, whether it's modern Italian to English or Chinese, Mandarin to Filipino to I mean all the stuff that's out there. Even today, it's amazing they're able to translate, let alone you're talking ancient languages. So let's back up a little bit. Now we've all seen, let's see if you can see it right here, this word. I don't know if you can see that or not. YHWH. It is known as the name that Moses gets at the burning bush of what God's name is. Even that has some tricky parts trying to translate because we don't know exactly what that sounds like. The most common term that I've heard is Yahweh by adding vowels to the consonants. So they didn't have them back then. They didn't have those consonants until about 700 AD is when they started adding A, E, I, O, U's, those types of symbols to symbolize those sounds in between the consonants. So Yahweh, the way we say it, or YHWH, is where a lot of this stems from. So Moses is given the name, which is translated in most Bibles as I am. There's a couple other ones out there that have been trying to get some traction on what else that name could have meant. And the reason why it's so difficult is the Hebrew people, the Jewish people, really took it very seriously not to take that name in vain. And it got to the point where they didn't even want to say it or write it. But how are they supposed to translate these scrolls or tell the stories to the next generations? Well, they started kind of coming up with different ways of being able to kind of clue you to what that name was. Another name for him was Adonai, which is basically another name for Lord or Master. So it was a way to be able to say, okay, that's why you see, you shall not take the Lord's name in vain. They started writing essentially Adonai, which meant Lord, in replacing Yahweh to make sure you didn't accidentally say the Lord's name in vain. They took it so seriously that as you start looking back 2,000 and 3,000 years later, you're trying to kind of plug in the gaps and go back to where it started. The other thing that's really interesting is you may see YHWH as JH, maybe V sometimes, or WH. And a lot of this is the same kind of thing. So the sound is a yow, a sound, like a Y sound, but many cultures, many languages, that's more looks like a J. So in English, it's kind of like cat or cake. It's a C shape, but it's a K sound. So that's kind of part of which translations were starting to circulate around the world, whether it was a Y or a J at the beginning. Now, this is where Jehovah starts to kick in. So as you saw Adonai and you saw this JHWH, they started to put those two together. It's a transliteration. So it's a way of basically being able to say, okay, here's this Yahweh or these words here. Here's Adonai, which is another name for Lord that was kind of intermingling in some of the scrolls. So they kind of started putting them together. That's where Jehovah comes from. It's the J, the E sound of Adonai, which was A with an apostrophe, depending on the translation. Then you have the H, OVAH. So it was like, it's so fascinating to see how we were trying to figure out what Yahweh, or what that sound was, based on very early scrolls, where later on scrolls were replacing those. So here's another thing you can see. A lot of our modern Bibles will have two different versions of Lord. One is L with an uppercase, and then ORD. That's more like a lord or a lady or a master, or somebody that maybe a boss, somebody that was a king or a lord or somebody along those lines. All uppercase, LORD, all is uppercase in many translations, is the word for Yahweh, whether it was Adonai or YHWH or JHWH. I mean, what a rabbit hole I've been going down here for the last hour, trying to better understand why and where these names have come from. So I hope that helps a little bit to realize kind of, one, the history that we know of and kind of where these names had disseminated from, and how over time through translation, filling in the gaps, adding consonants, and really making sure the sound is matches the symbol. I mean, like I said, in English, cake, or cat, you would think it'd be KAT or KAKE, when really it's a C. So it's the shape of a C, but the sound of a K. So the very similar thing. I've even been finding out like Jerusalem, because that's what we call Jerusalem, is a J when really is more of a Y sound. So I'm not even going to try to say Jerusalem without using J. I mean, that's the way I've always known it. That's just my English background, my Western English background. But the more I've studied kind of the why behind this, the more it just gets me excited about this stuff. I just love this stuff, man. I love this book. I love studying it. I love studying the translations. When I was raised, there was always just kind of one translation. But the more I found out about the other translations and what they're trying to accomplish, and what they have to deal with to try to get this document into a language I can actually understand. And there's always going to be a balance between the very literal sound and very literal meaning versus what it was trying to tell you, like the symbolism, the parable, the story behind what they were trying to say. And I just love the work that goes into translating these. And I love studying the different translations and how they came up with the solution that they've come up with, and following tradition and following years and years of scholarly advice. Now, sometimes I do find something, okay, that was maybe wrong. We need to tweak it a little bit to make sure we're getting the true spirit behind what was being translated. But it's amazing how much we got right. And there's got to be a divine nature behind this. There's got to be something that is inspired within this document. And I just love studying it. So hope you enjoyed the video. I've got some other ones on Adonai. I've got some great stuff on El Shaddai, another name that was used to not take the Lord's name in vain. I got some great stuff on that. So look for that video coming up. If you have any other comments, questions, concerns, things I got right, things I got wrong, please comment. Love to talk to you about this stuff. And God bless. I can't wait to do another video with you.